Welcome to the Principles of Progress podcast from Food Service Consulting Society International, FCSI. My name is Tina Nielsen. I'm the editor of FCSI's quarterly magazine, Food Service Consultant. In this podcast, we explore the different elements of ESG and their impact on the food service sector. The Principles of Progress podcast is supported by Burner. Please check out their website on burner.com. Today, I speak to Chris Tripoli, principal with the Restaurant Clinic, about the governance piece of ESG and what it looks like in practice in food service businesses. So Chris, thank you so much for joining me for the Principles of Progress podcast. We're going to be talking about the G in ESG today, discussing what governance means for food service and what it looks like in practice. If you could perhaps first just outline your role, give a brief overview of your expertise and experience.
Absolutely. Happy to be with you today. I have been a long time FCSI member, enjoy the items that I've been able to learn and the people that I've been able to meet and work with. I'm a longtime industry consultant, having spent my entire career in food service. On the culinary side, on the management side, I've been fortunate enough to own my own restaurant businesses. But then for the last 25, 26 years, I've consulted. And most of my consulting is with management leadership teams, helping to improve operations and how to put together strategies for growth. And so that's what I've been doing. I'm a principal with the Restaurant Clinic. The Restaurant Clinic is an educational and consulting group that specializes in the restaurant sector of food service.
And so from your point of view, what does the G in ESG mean?
Well, the governance part of ESG is very important. It's sort of the fuel for the engine, so to speak. I think most consultants kind of look at how we work with clients in a similar fashion. Our job is to help them improve. So that means we have to help them understand issues and make recommendations that are best. So the E and the S, environmental and social portions of ESG are really more of outlining the what's, the what can be done. Governance is really more of the how. It's more of the, how to self-govern, how to implement, how to actually approach ESG, how to successfully transform and improve, your business by using these principles. So that's what the G, means for me. It's the how version of putting the what's into action properly.
Okay. And what aspects of a food service operation might it cover?
It'll start at the top, but I think to properly, govern yourself for improvement, I think you should have hit all levels. Small companies, people say doing maybe 2-3 units, people doing hospitality as a hands-on independent. Maybe they're in gross revenues of, say, 10 to 20 million in annual sales. They're considered the more smaller business. They have 3 or 4 units or maybe 2 or 3 concepts in a catering company. 2, of course, the much larger ones, regional food service groups, institutional food service companies, service contract groups, hotel management companies, larger companies with, say, much more corporate levels and much more corporate support. I think all levels can. It'll just look a little different. For example, I think the biggest principle is that whether you're large or small in food service, governance is going to start with the right leader. So if you're having a chairman of a board, or if you're having a president, chief operating officer, and there isn't the understanding or there isn't the buy-in for the improvement, for the transparency, for the engagement that's necessary, then the governance is going to be a failure. It's going to be very hard to implement, and I don't see the improvement happening. And then to my earlier point, even a smaller company, if you're the hands-on operator, but you don't want to operate your business on the basic principles of ESG, and you don't see any benefit, for example, of engagement of key staff or continued development or social consciousness, if you don't, buy in and see the improvement of that, then obviously the governance is hindered.
Does governance only happen at the top?
Yes. To be effective, it starts at the top, but it doesn't end there. In food service, most of our implementation is done on the front lines. Most of the successful policies for improvement, it's almost like if you follow culinary. A lot of the culinary can be researched, it can be developed, it can stay on trend, but then the guest only sees it's successful if everyone on the line is implementing culinary principles, temperature, portion, taste, consistently online. So I think as a consultancy, we'd want to approach ESG the same way. It starts at the top, of course. There's got to be understanding and buy-in. But if there's not implementation, if you're not going to say be transparent with management and engage them more in the principles and the vision of the business, and then if they're not going to be bringing in key staff leaders to implement your community consciousness, your hands-on philanthropy, your support, the things that come out of the social section, if you're not going to be implementing that, if you're not going to be, say, transparent to get improvement suggestions from key staff, then governance, again, is going to be hindered. It's not going to be able to be properly implemented or supervised.
So what does best practice look like?
I think best practices would start with the right leader creating the right plan. That's the step one, a short-term strategy of getting key people to say, help us define how we're going to be able to improve for the next, say, 3 to 5 years. We're not just talking budget and numbers. No, we're talking purpose, mission, and vision. How am I going to better govern the implementation of our social and our environmental practices on a routine basis? So it's got to start with a leader making a plan. The next step, of course, has to be buy-in. So that means improved communication with key staff, so that there is active buy-in. If management and key staff feel distant from ownership, then they'll see the mission, they'll see the vision and the values separately from daily operations. But if they're engaged, if they're part of the process, if there's routine communication, and again, I don't mean just regular weekly numbers meetings. I don't mean just monthly financial meetings with management to compare to budget. We do that anyway, but this is governing ESG. So this is a higher principle. We're trying to transform our approach to business. And we're trying to teach them that actually, if we're enhancing our values, we can do that in a way that also improves the value of our business. So I think those are the two biggest best practices that as consultants, we would be challenged to teach: the right leader, the right buy-in, and then the ongoing communication so that there's understanding, transparency, and actual excitement in implementing whatever the social and environmental practices that were adopted that we're now going to be governing. In that respect, it's not that unlike the conscious capitalism, a movement that is beginning to pick up some speed, and I've been studying. There's some similarities there where they teach that in order to have a higher level of purpose, in order to benefit community, in order to be more environmental minded, in order to be more, socially aware and secure, that you must find ways of operating the business that benefits the business, but benefits all those you count on for your business. It's kind of an interesting principle.
Yes.
And it's very similar, to what I know ESG practices are.
So the food service sector, sort of once in a while we get these scandals or big problems uncovered where there's been a failure of governance. How would you assess the food services industry as a whole? Is it a leader? Is it a follower? Is it progressive, slow moving?
I would say we are, in comparison to other industries, a little more progressive, not all the way there, but more aware and getting better, I think. I'm very pleased, actually, that it's the industry that, I was just sort of raised in, so to speak, because, first working in this industry, I was immediately aware of the fact as a teenager that our industry counts on all people equally. And so you're in a kitchen or a production facility where men and women are working in the same position. They're trained the same way and they're paid the same wage. Okay, I just thought that's the way the world was. Amazing when I started meeting people in other industries and I realized this is a huge issue. We're always in situations where people might speak different languages. I didn't realize that was a big issue. You know, restaurants, hospitals, school systems, English, Spanish, men, women, young, old, you're being paid for the job, not based on any of those other factors. So when it comes to things like equal practices, diversity, we're looked at as a little more progressive than obviously other industries. My first management position was replacing a female. She had been there for 3 years. She moved on, I forget where to. She left the industry to do real estate or something. And so I became the private dining room, banquet, catering manager. Now, obviously, I didn't start out at the wage that she had. I was new, inexperienced, less valued. See, so our industry, as I learned very young, set things like compensation, bonuses, responsibility on that. Your value, your experience. It wasn't, well, he's a guy, he's got to make more. So I'm hoping other industries, really, really catch up and work much harder. But now, having said all of that, does that mean that we're really there and we're a leader of other industries? Not so much. I think when it comes to things like quality of life issues, and when it comes to importance of community issues, and even still some compensation comparison, some of our industry people and the hours they work, the responsibility they carry for the management wage that they earn, compared to, say, managers of other industries, say with equal responsibilities and hours, are still a little behind. So I think that we're making the transition for people to look at food service overall as a really good long-term career. Because as you've probably heard, most consultants have heard this, all their life, that too many people look at our industry as something you do until you really figure out what you're going to be doing. You meet a ton of professional accountants that say, oh, sure, when I was in college, I was in the food service business. I worked for a caterer, or I helped on a food truck, or I was a bartender for 4 years until I figured out what I was going to do. And I think what we're realizing is that we've got a ways to go to show that if this is an interest of you, if you're really interested in the hospitality industry, there are so many levels and so many jobs, from front of the house, back of the house, admin, sales, management, where you can find a way to stay and grow and have a tremendous career. So we've got a little ways to go for that. So that's kind of how I view it right now.
Yeah. What are the drivers? It's not so much legislation, I guess, but what are the drivers in this area of improving governance levels in ESG?
I think the more and more self-awareness, I think, is the biggest driver. I think the more and more the people who are the investors start looking at the long-term value of their investment rather than just quarter-to-quarter financial results, and see that retention of people, the value of people, goes more than just compensation, but they really need to see their career as something that they can learn, benefit from, and stay. I think the more we start dwelling on retention in our industry, and I think that's the driver. Now, I don't really see legislation or government rules, regulations, or laws that could impact that kind of teaching. They're more practicing legislation, as I see it, is really more practicing rules and regulations on the lower end, redefining minimum wage to actually mean living wage. Our industry, as I think most others, never really defined it that way. We've always been taught minimum wage is just that. It's an absolute minimum. Yeah. It's what you might do as a part-time or a starter job until you work your way into a more fulfilling position. But I see governance coming from governments wanting to redefine that as there are too many people that find minimum wage jobs, and that is what they're looking at for their career. That is it, that they need to live on that. I think a better driver, really, like I said, is going to come from the self-awareness. The more our industry stays attuned to the community, because the market really drives. And we see right now, for example, that we are being taught things by the people that become our staff members. We're being taught things. Labor is very competitive. That's driving wages higher. That's a good thing. I think if people are earning a little bit more before and then if they become very interested in what they're doing, they have a better opportunity for staying. But the market drove that. I mean, I'm in a country that's got a minimum wage right now that's, beneath industry standards. It's just politicians can't agree on what to do with it, but we've moved on. I mean, everyone's hiring at a higher wage than that because the market drives it. And so as long as it starts with investors expecting more than just financial results, then of course the leaderships need to lead our teams looking for more than just short-term financial results. Then we're going to start looking at our labor as more than just hire and train, but we're going to start looking at them as more as retaining. And that's an exciting thing. I have clients that are there, and it's exciting to take a look at their retention practices because they're very open with their labor and transparent with things of how to operate the business and engaging them in how to improve guest services, how to improve our brand, how to become more active in the community. The more the market likes us, the more the community sees us as not just a business, but good people in a business, then the better it is for our brand. Because quite frankly, people like doing business with people they like. So once we put all that together, then we start stressing retention, and we come up with the new pyramid, that we see that I think ESG kind of is taking us to. And that's where there's 3 equal balances that are driving the future of labor if you want to retain people. And the first thing that they're really looking for, of course, is quality of compensation, fair marketable wages for the work they're putting in. But unlike, say, earlier generations, the generations we're working with now have other 2 items that are equally important. And the other one is the quality of the work and the work environment. Are they treated fairly? Are they involved? Do you engage me in improvement conversations? Am I a part of the program? Do I feel important? Because if so, then I belong here. They're not just looking for a job and a check. They're looking for a sense of belonging. And that's as important as, of course, a fair marketable wage. And then the third one, of course, is the quality of life. If I feel like I'm getting scheduled in advance, I can easily route other things that are important to me too, like my community interests, my time with family, my future schooling, or something like that. If they feel like I've got an employer that understands whatever other important issues I have, then bingo, I've got quality of compensation, quality of work, and I've got quality of life. And that's kind of where we need to get to.
So who is setting the standards? Is it the big companies, the small companies, then a particular market segment?
Probably a little bit of each. Small to mid-sized food service companies are typically finding themselves competing against the larger brands a lot for everything, for market share, and then also for labor market. But I think there's an awful lot of leaders in the small, mid-size, and regional-based companies that have already adopted better practices for social involvement, community consciousness, staff retention. They've actually engaged people and developed a higher purpose and vision for their business. So basically, they've already moved, from the it's a business and we're looking at short-term financial gain only, but they've already started preaching, we're looking at long-term benefits. Because if we practice long-term benefits, and that's community involvement, that's social awareness, that's philanthropy, then that helps value in the brand. And it also helps keep our people, longer. I'm thinking of a small company that years ago won the Malcolm Baldrige Award. And I thought that was so odd because they're fast food. But if you ever look at the business practices of a company called Pals, and then of course, if you look at a larger, fast food company like Chick-fil-A, the practices that they have, that they started long ago with regard to transparency, management involvement, key staff development, are a lot of the principles that I see the governance portion of ESG. So we're getting back to market driven again. And I just think that the more aware companies are the ones that are going to more quickly respond. And that's what's going to keep them out front. And hopefully we'll find them at all levels, not just large publicly held groups, but also regional and even smaller independents as well.
Yeah, I guess it's easier to control in a smaller place because you have fewer people involved.
I think so too. I think there's less levels, but see, even larger companies now are trying to break down those traditional levels, and that's really going to improve the governance of the ESG principles. You know, if they can go from investor and board member to say upper management and boom, directly to units. And that means units are more involved, key staff members and unit managers, they don't really feel distance. I think it may be a little bit more of a challenge, but they can do it. It's sort of inverting the pyramid, so to speak, you know, and in food service, that's really been fun to do. The few opportunities that I've had to help companies switch their thinking and actually drawing the inverted, you know, pyramid, that guess what, guys, it all starts at the unit level. And that's what's most important. They're the guest connector. They're the policy and procedure prover if it's not implemented well. So then their managers are basically to support them and assist. And those managers are supervised by regionals who need to support and assist them. And those regionals are getting their information, of course, from, you know, corporate, but corporate is right here. They're the peak of the pyramid, but now they're on the bottom. Their job is to inform, educate, assist, rather than the old days of, no, I'm on top. All you guys do the work and please report to me. So hopefully we see a lot more of that.
Yeah. As a consultant, how much of an education role do you play?
A lot. I think that's the key. As a consultant, if we're working on, say, setting strategy, and we're helping them, say, improve vision, which of course also gets into operation efficiency and financial, you know, improvement too. But that's our biggest role. I think we have to let our clients know from the onset that we are there to make them more aware of their choices and how to be. So the more examples we can show, the more education we can give, that's our number one job. See, then our number two job is to say, now based on that, we can make specific recommendations. So, you know, I boil that down to like, hey, if it were me, if it were me, fill in the blank. Here's my recommended plan of action. What we can't do, and of course, I know sometimes this is the frustrating point, is that we can't make the final decisions. You know, we're not the actual implementers, but we can really help implementation of these principles by really, really stressing those first two steps: the education, making them aware, showing them how it'll work, and then giving them a recommended plan of basically how to do it. And I think sometimes we have to be that specific. If I were you, let's do this first, and let's see how that works. And then in a few months, let's do 2. Then let's do step 3. And before you know it, we get them all the way to the end, which is the fun part, what I call the everybody wins part, because there could actually be operation evaluations. There could be incentive bonuses for key staff, trainers, unit managers, based on the performance, but the performance includes the ESG principles. Those things should be aligned right along with your annual operating plan. So if you're going to be doing, say, quarterly evaluations, if you're going to do key people bonuses, these principles should be woven in. Now that would be fun.
Yeah. Do you think that this is gaining more traction? Where do you think it's all heading? Do you think this is just going to be standard?
Well, I don't know. I would hope that it would become a standard. I think we're in our initial stages. You know, we're in the education awareness stage. Our industry is so large, really. We may be in that one for a while. But yeah, I don't think it is out of reach at all to think that the day's coming, because no matter what level of food service you're in, you are still people driven. You know, it's a people, you know, business after all. So large company, small company, you know, hospitals, cruise ships, small restaurants, neighborhood pizzeria, you pick it. It's still people driven. So could the handling of people, the engagement of people from investment partner to manager to, say, you know, hourly worker improve as these principles get moved out? Absolutely. Could it become the standard? Possibly, Because take a look at the other things that have sort of become standards, from the changes of selection process, the inclusion of people in evaluations and incentive bonuses. Look at the standards now that I see out there that, say, 2 decades ago weren't practiced. Say how we select. It's a pretty good standard in the industry that training now isn't just initial training, and then you just expect people to do it because I told you so. But see, a couple decades ago, yeah, I ran into that everywhere. Now people look at training as, no, I really need a people officer. I need to know that my initial training is turning into ongoing improvement, staff development, cross-training, promotion to management. And so I need to have a development plan for my people. A couple decades ago, that was very rare. Now it's almost standard. So if we take a look at that, could the principles as being taught by ESG be standard? It's possible. It'd be a great thing.
Well, on that note, Chris, thank you so much for joining me for this podcast. It's super interesting to chat to you. I appreciate your time.
Absolutely. A joy to be here.
Thank you for listening to the Principles of Progress podcast. I'd like to thank Burner for supporting the series. Please check out their website at burner.com. Please also check out the FCSI website, fcsi.org, for more podcasts and other digital content. Thank you and have a great day.